Okay, YouTube, today we're going to be making a simple wooden stool. I apologize for kind of the slapdash way this thing was put together. I kind of made it on the spur of the moment because we needed a stool. I also changed the design about halfway through, so here where you see me cutting 9 14-inch boards, I ended up only using 4 of these, I think, along with 2 12-inch boards and 2 6-inch boards for the main part of the stool. I then used a couple of 2x4s that were just cut to size to fit between the legs, and I believe it was a 12-inch piece of 1x4 to help support those. The stool is a little bit over-engineered, but I figure it's better to over-engineer it than have it collapse on me later. Also, originally I planned on using 3 or 4 14-inch slats to make the top of the stool. You could still do that, and that's why I ended up cutting all these pieces. But what I ended up doing was I had an old stool that had broken, and I used the top off of that so I'd have a padded seat. So without further ado, let's get to it here. Here I am starting the glue up on the main structure of the stool. I used 2 6-inch pieces on each end and 2 14-inch pieces on the sides. This is mostly custom fit to the stool top that I had. Originally I was going to make this 12 inches wide by 14 inches long, but I already had a stool top and that would give me a padded seat and allow me to use less wood, so this is the direction I went. I'm using a brad nailer here to secure my boards, mostly because I don't want to wait around for glue to dry with clamps, and I do eventually put a few screws in this thing for a little extra support, but the glue should technically be enough. Initially I was going to use one long centerpiece down the center of this box to attach the top of the stool to, but I ended up cutting it a little too short and it didn't quite fit. So I decided to chop it down into 2 6-inch pieces that would fit along the top. This gave my box a lot more structure and gave me plenty of attachment points for the stool top, so I think it worked out better in the end than this centerpiece that I attempted first. The legs are made from some of the 14-inch pieces of 1x4 that I cut earlier. Again, I'm gluing them on and then using brad nails to secure them in place for the initial assembly. Eventually I do add some wood screws to kind of shore them up and give them a little more strength. Now that the initial structure of the stool is done, I decided that the legs needed a little extra support just to keep them from wobbling and potentially breaking off. These are kind of long. If you had shorter stool legs, you wouldn't need this, but again, I kind of over-engineered this because I'm a big guy and didn't want it breaking on me. Eventually what I decided on was to use a couple pieces of 2x4 that were cut to fit between the legs, and then a piece of 1x4 that I'd cut earlier to kind of brace the 2x4 so that way the legs can't really move in either the X or Y axis, and it actually made a really sturdy stool without being overly heavy. The one thing I wish I would have done differently with the 2x4 braces was their positioning. I managed to get them fairly level, but I ended up putting them closer to one side than the other. It's not a big deal, it's more of an aesthetics thing, and you can't really see it unless you're really looking at it, but it did kind of bother me. This next step is purely aesthetic. I took my router and rounded over all the edges that I could get to with it. I probably should have done this before I started assembly, but I don't have a router table and didn't really feel like bolting all these down, so this worked. And really, when the stool is all done, there's really no edge that you could touch or see that's not routed over, so I think it worked well. The last step before installing the seat was a couple coats of spray paint. This is Rust-Oleum matte camo paint. I think it's a dark brown. It really matched the room that this stool is going in, and plus it was the quickest and easiest way to do this. All the other paint I have would have required me to use a brush and taken much longer. So this is what I opted for since this was kind of a quick little morning project. The last step is just to attach the seat. I centered it on the stool and then used some wood screws to attach it to the 2 6-inch pieces that I installed in the top of the stool. There's a 1/2 inch piece of plywood on the bottom of this stool seats, so it actually worked out pretty good. The one issue I did have was I had to jerry rig a longer screw bit for my drill because the 2x4 bracing was in the way. I think if I had thought this through a little better, I either would have installed the seat before I installed the bracing, or I would have moved the bracing closer to the center so that it wasn't in the way. But in the end, this worked out pretty well, and there's 6 wood screws holding it in, so I don't think it's coming off. Here are a few photos of the finished seat. As you can see, it turned out pretty good, and it actually is very sturdy, and it's not overly heavy considering what it's made out of. If you found this video helpful or informative, please like, share, and subscribe, and I will see you in the next one.